Right. I want to thank all of you for joining us today for this talk about prepping our adult learners for the GED math exam. I am the program director. Most of you guys know me, but I want to introduce the two presenters today because you probably don't know them. Brad Roth has been a tutor with Oakland Literacy for over 4 years. He is a retired physics professor from Oakland University, but boy, he's just willing to just jump in and help with whatever is needed. Physics, math, nursing last summer. So we're really grateful to him. And he's joined by Warren Block, who is a retired math teacher from Troy High School.
Athens.
Troy Athens, sorry.
Okay.
Lots and lots of years of teaching math at all different levels, getting people ready for graduation and beyond. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and I'll just monitor the chat, Brad, and anything else you need. Otherwise, I'm going to be on mute.
Okay, I am going to start my PowerPoint. Just a second here. Okay, so we're going to talk about the GED math exam, and we're a small group. So if you have questions, just unmute yourself and pipe right up and ask. No need to go through any formal process. This is mainly for students and for tutors who have students near the time to take the exam, but I think it'll also be useful for tutors who are just starting out with a student because it gives them sort of an overview of where you're ultimately going. But the main goal for today is to try to understand what topics are on the GED math exam. You should get 2 practice tests that I just made, and they're designed for people doing Oakland Literacy Council tutoring. They're PDF files, 1 problem and a lot of white space. You open them in Kami, your student has the pen, they got plenty of space to work. So I found them very useful with my student. Hopefully you'll find them useful too. Essential Education also has practice exams. You can get these great big books at the library that has big practice exams. There's exams all over online, but you got 2 more that should be coming from me. Okay, so let us, first of all, I thought we'd go around. We did a little bit of introductions, but let's just give some real quick introductions. I'll start. My name again is Brad Roth. I'm over here in Rochester Hills, Michigan. And what do I want to accomplish today? I want to try to explain what the topics are on the GED exam. So Warren, maybe you could go.
Hey, I'm Warren Block. I taught at Athens for 37 years. I'm retired, and I just started tutoring for OLC in March, I think is when I started. And I had 3 tutors so far. The first one didn't want me. The second one went to jail, and the third one has had some health issues, but I have a good relationship with him, and hopefully we'll have some positive results.
So how about you, Les?
I am a retired Ford engineer. I spent 30+ years at Ford. I never taught math per se, but when I was in college, while in college, I tutored 9th grade algebra, and I actually enjoyed tutoring. I really enjoyed seeing students go from D's or C's to doing A-level work. And I wanted, when I heard about the program, I thought that would be something that I would want to do to help students to become better at math.
How about you, Kim?
So I'm Kim Skoranek. I'm in Waterford, Michigan, and I retired from elementary teaching at the end of October in 2022. So I've been teaching adults in doing corporate trainings, by trade, I'm now an instructional designer. So I really enjoyed teaching math to my students, just seeing that light bulb go on. And I love math because there's a black and white answer. It is this or it is this, and there's a procedure, and that just settles my soul. So I really want to try and convince others that math isn't scary. It's fun, and that they can do it.
Okay, Angela.
Hello, everyone. Mr. Burnett is my tutor. I did ask Lori to be on this Zoom call. It's very important to me sometime to reset. So sometime listening or looking at math in a different way helps me so that when I get to my tutoring sessions, I'm able to view things in different ways.
Great, we're delighted to have you. Daniel.
Hi, my name's Daniel. I'm currently attending Schoolcraft to get a teacher certification for 6 through 12 math education. So I was hoping to get some experience and, do some volunteering before I get in the classroom full time.
Okay, Miriam.
Yeah, I'm a retired engineer from Chrysler. I've had 3 math students from OLC, and I'm working with one currently. All 3 of them have not been anywhere close to ready to get their GED, but yeah, I was kind of curious to see what this was about. I know the one that I'm currently working with, she really wants to get her GED, so she has lots of
Okay.
issues though with finding time to do math, so.
I think I've gotten everybody. If not, speak up. Okay. Well, one of the things to start on the GED.
Brad, sorry
is-
to interrupt, but I think
Yes.
Marion's, is that Kevin, your husband on the other account, Marion, or is that both
Yeah,
you?
I told him to turn his camera on so everyone knew it wasn't me.
Oh, all right. Well,
If you want to say hello, feel free if you've got the capability.
Yeah, can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, I'm Kevin Power. I'm Marion Power's husband. So I've just got one student that I've been tutoring for about a year now. So I'm interested to hear on different techniques that you can use to explain the math.
Okay, great. All right. So about the GED test, this will be very centered on the test. There's only one calculator you can use on the test, and that is this one shown here. I have a very similar calculator. My calculator is a TI 30XA, and it turns out it's completely different than the one that is allowed on the test. So it's a good idea that your student have this, because the last thing you want is your student learning how to use their calculator during the exam. So it's pretty important that they get this specific calculator. Now, let's see here. Okay. They also, for the GED, give you a formula sheet, and you can see it here. It's online. They can pull it up during the test. It's got a whole bunch of formulas. This writing is a little small on this slide, so here's an expanded version. It's got a bunch of geometry equations. Notice it gives you the equation. It doesn't tell you what the symbols mean. So it can't replace, working the problems and working on this. It's useful sometimes if there's a 1/3, you can't remember, is volume 4/3 pi r cubed or was that 2/3? That's the kind of thing it's really useful for. But you got to learn what the symbols are. And so there's a lot of geometry information. And then there's also a little bit of statistics and then some algebra equations, and even some equations that are useful for word problems. So that's all available. And if you want to know what's on the GED exam, one way to find out is to look at what equations they give you. They wouldn't give you the equation if they weren't planning on asking that type of question. Okay, so here's probably the most important slide in the whole talk. What are the topics? There's, first of all, basic math skills: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. You got to be able to do your arithmetic. And then there's going to be fractions and converting fractions to decimals, decimals to percentages, going back and forth. That's going to be a skill they'll need. Powers and square roots. are skills they're going to need. So those are some basic math. Then there's algebra, polynomials, 3x plus 5, and taking two polynomials and adding them, or two polynomials and multiplying them, those kind of operations. There's linear equations, y equals 5x minus 2, okay? And, or 0 equals 5x minus 2, solve for x. Those linear equations you need to be able to solve. And then there's going to be sometimes systems of two linear equations. A linear equation on the xy axes can be represented as a line. A system of two linear equations is two lines that intersect, and you're trying to find the point of intersection. So that's one of the harder types of problems they have. And also quadratic equations, and using the quadratic formula is another one that, fortunately, the quadratic formula is given on the formula sheet. But that's the sort of algebra you need. Then there are combinations and permutations. We'll see some examples. All of these we're going to show with examples. This is basically counting. How many ways can you select 2 out of 9 options? So those are counting properties. Geometry. So we saw a lot of geometry on the formula sheet. There will be 2 and 3D geometry. A little bit of probability and statistics. Not that much, but a little bit. And then probably the most important questions on the whole exam. Drat. I don't, there, good. Word problems and interpreting graphs and data. You know, if you don't know combinations and permutations, well, you might miss 1 or 2 questions, but you can probably get through the exam. If you don't know word problems and interpreting graphs and data, you're pretty much not going to be able to handle it. So those are going to be extremely common type of problems. So those are really the summary of the topics. It's sometimes useful to say what's not on the exam. Well, what's not in the exam? Exponential functions and logarithms are not. Trigonometry, sines, cosines, and tangents are not. Vectors, when you have a number, you have a length and a direction. Vectors are not on the exam. Matrices, sort of like these little arrays of numbers that you can multiply out. Linear algebra, you might call it. Those are not on the exam. Complex numbers aren't there. X plus IY, where I is the square root of -1. So imaginary numbers. None of that's on the exams. Conic sections, you can take a cone and slice it in different ways and get parabolas and hyperbolas and ellipses. Interesting stuff. It's not in the exam.
How about parabolas? Parabolas in the quadratic equation section.
Parabolas is sort of an exception in that you can represent a parabola using a quadratic equation and then finding where it crosses x or y equals 0 and using the formula. So a parabola, in the sense that it's what's quadratic expression can be represented in the plane are there. You're not going to have to find the minimum or move it around or rotate it and find its rotated coordinates, any kind of that kind of stuff. When I was in high school, my geometry class started with a few basic postulates and then theorem proof, theorem proof. We were going to prove all these things. And it's kind of a beautiful way to learn geometry. It's back to Euclid, but it's not on the GED exam. I've never seen a proof on the GED exam. And finally, calculus is way beyond where these students are going to be. So that's sort of some ideas of what's on the exam, what's not. Okay. Now I'm going to hand it over to Warren for a couple slides.
Okay. The GED test has 46 questions. The first 5 cannot use a calculator. And you have almost 2 hours. So that comes down to just under 3 minutes per problem. So you want to think about how fast you can do some of these problems and what shortcuts you could take to get the answer more quickly. 70% is passing, and most but not all of the questions are multiple choice. The ones we're going to do today are all multiple choice. Next slide, unless you have a question. So I suggest you really read the question to figure out what is the answer going to look like. As you read the question, just jot down the numbers you're going to be using, rule out any irrelevant ones, and work with those and try and put them in an equation or decide what operations you're going to be using. And hopefully you'll come up with a method to solve the equation or the problem. I, especially in these problems, like to use 3 for pi, so I don't have to rely on my calculator, and then look at the answers and see if they round, it'll be a little bit less than you might expect or more, and see if you can pick out the answer that way. If you can't answer the problem, just try to rule out obviously impossible answers, or look at the answers, read the answers into the question, and see which one makes sense. Any questions?
Okay, one thing is that the GED is not all multiple choice. There are some sort of fill in the blanks and other things, but my practice exam that I made is all multiple choice. So so that's a slight difference between the practice exam and the actual exam. Okay, so let's stop talking about in general cases, and let's just start doing one of these practice exams. So this is one of the 2 that I sent you. We'll go through question by question and see what they're like. And remember, the first 5 questions, you can't use your calculator. So we're going to go into the breakout rooms, and I'm going to have to, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to have to stop that and go over to Zoom. And now I'm, okay, it was so easy when I was getting ready, but now I'm having trouble finding the breakout room material.
You want me to put folks in a breakout room, Brad, while you have your screen up, or?
Yeah, can you set up the breakout room?
Yeah, we're co-hosts, so I can do that too.
Okay. Okay, that would actually be useful because I'm having trouble now.
So do you want to share that question in chat though, because they're going to lose your.
They're going to lose that question. Okay. Yeah, I guess I better do that. I better share it in the chat.
And how many breakout rooms do you want? Do you want 2
I
in a
was
room?
thinking 2 per room, but 2 people per room. So however that works out. Unfortunately, I'm not able to cut and paste this. Right.
Let me type it real.
Okay. Well, okay, let's just talk about it for a second. You have a recipe that makes 36 cupcakes. You only need 12 cupcakes. That calls for 4 cups of, the recipe calls for 4 cups of flour. How many cups of flour do you need? So I think that I think you can remember that while we go to the breakout room. Let's see. Okay. I think we're just going to continue on with
Okay, I
this.
just put the question in breakout in the
Okay.
chat. So folks click on their chat. They can see the question, and then I'll open up the breakout rooms.
That'd be great. And we're going to have just a short time because you only have 3 minutes. So at 2 minutes, we'll call people back in. So it's just going to be a short time. Mainly want to get the experience that your students are going to have on the test where they don't have a whole lot of time.
All right, you should be
go ahead.
invited to join a breakout room in just a second.
Okay. And when you're in the room, you can talk.
If you want, I can join that room instead of you, or if
I think whatever works fast.
you just went in with Marion. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll try typing in there. Les, you just need to click the join the breakout room. You should have a button to say join. Les, do you see that? All right, I guess he figured it out.
Okay. Sorry for this. I thought I had it ready, and then all of a sudden,
Okay.
when I was
Yeah, you know, that
in the
always.
talk, things look different.
Is there another one like that? Because I could go ahead and just pull up the
There's-
slide and copy.
There's several like that. They'll all have
Can you tell me the slide numbers and I can cut and paste while we're waiting?
let me see here. It will be uh
Oh,
question number 8. That's not slide number. That's actually slide number 20. Question 8.
okay.
Question 11, which is slide 24, question 11.
Okay.
And next one is slide 32, which is question 18.
Okay.
And there's still another one or two.
Seems like a lot to get through in an hour.
Yeah, slide 41, question 26.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right, let me pull up the actual PowerPoint here and
Okay.
I can easily copy and paste.
Okay. But I think they've had their 2 minutes now.
Are you gonna close the breakout room or do you want me to?
I don't think I have access to it. I can't find it so anywhere
Okay, I'm gonna
now.
close them
So
then.
okay. All right.
I see why you can't copy and paste because this is a PDF or something you inserted.
Yeah, it's a PDF that I pasted them in there.
So I'm gonna I copied it in. Is that big enough to read and chat? Not really. Pretty small.
Problem was okay. Would have been nice to see the answers.
Yeah.
I sent those two later.
Okay. All right. So everybody, they're still working away. Okay. So everybody should be back. Okay. Anybody get an answer? Either A, B, C, D, or number of cups.
D.
D, 1 1/3. Okay, right. So this problem, I mean, this is the type of problem you need to be able to do without a calculator. I think the easiest way is just say you need 1/3 of the recipe. So 4 cups of flour is 4/3. Notice students need to be comfortable with both improper fractions, the numerator is larger than the denominator, and converting them to mixed fractions, 1 1/3. So they need to be fairly comfortable with fractions. It's not real hard problems, but fractions are just really fundamental. Okay. Also, you can do this problem using proportions, which in some ways is a nice way to do it. It's an alternative way. All right, number 2, how many seconds are in 1 hour and 35 minutes? Again, you can't use a calculator. Well, you need to know some basic facts. I mean, like 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. So 1 hour and 35 minutes comes out to be 95 minutes. And if you take 95 minutes and times 60 seconds per minute, you get 5,700 seconds. Now, if you can't use a calculator, 95 times 60 is a little bit of work, but you can do this by estimation. In 95 minutes, that's close to 100 minutes. If it was 100 minutes, it would be 6,000 seconds. 95 is a little less than 100, so you expect something that's a little less than 6,000. That's clearly 5,700. there's a lot of questions on the GED where you don't really have to go through all the calculations. You can just use estimation like that to get you to the answer. And it's really useful even if you do use your calculator, because you want to be able to, you can make a mistake using your calculator and get some completely ridiculous answer. If you aren't thinking about the problem at that while you're doing it, you're just going to select the ridiculous answer. Whereas here, it helps you think through and get some number sense. Okay, let's continue with the ones we can't use the calculator on. Is here, 645 divided by 15. Can't use the calculator. Well, your student technically is going to need to do long division. Now, how many of you, just raise your hands, how many of you have done long division other than with tutoring, but just have done long division in your life in the last year? Anybody?
Yep.
I don't think so. Okay, we have one. I haven't probably done long division for decades. I'm so used to using the calculator. But again, you don't really have to do long division. 645 divided by 15. Well, 15, if you multiply by 4, is 60. And 645 is around 600. 600 over 60, that's 10 times the 4. That should be around 40, but it's a little low because 645 is over 600. You can just do estimates and you can rule out all the other answers that, as Warren said, are ridiculous answers. And you don't have to go through long division exactly. I personally view long division to be in math what cursive writing is in science, and sort of a dying art. You can decide. It's kind of complicated to teach long division. What do you do with the remainder? Where's the decimal point go? You can decide whether it's worth it with your student or not. I was fortunate in my student that already knew how to do long division, so we didn't have to go through it. But 41 of the 46 questions you can use the calculator, and it's not an issue. It's just whether one pops up when you can't use the calculator.
How do they stop you using a calculator?
I think they actually have the online calculator. This is one problem, is I've never physically gone in and taken the GEDs, so I can't tell you for certain, but I think they don't let you even bring the calculator in. I think they have the calculator exactly the same as the one that I showed you the picture of online, and you can use it, but it's probably not activated for the first 5 questions.
Oh, okay.
I believe that's the answer.
That's a little bit complicated to use an online version of that calculator.
It is. And this is, I mean, there's a few questions that people will ask that I wish I'd gone in and taken the GED so I could give you a better answer. Unfortunately, it's $50, and I haven't decided to spend that much money to take the exam. But that's the way I understand it, is that it's an online calculator.
Brad,
Yep.
this is Lori, but I believe the GED has a calculator practice thing. If somebody's going to be doing the test online, I'll look while we're talking to see if I can find it on their website, so they can get familiar with using those online tools.
That would be useful.
I have a question for Brad. As you created this test, your answers were reasonable answers that they might get if they do the wrong operation. So 645 minus 15 is 630, and times 15, I assume, is 9675. So I wonder how often the distractors are like that.
My understanding from reading various books and things is that they do that a lot. They put in the common mistakes as the alternate answers. So, you know, that's you just gotta live with it.
In the exam, have you got pencil and paper then?
I think you have some kind of whiteboard, or maybe some places have pencil and paper. There's something that you can do work on, which really would be important, because like if you're multiplying 2 polynomials or something, you really want to be able to write it out. So I think so, but whether it's physical pencil and paper or whiteboard or some online tablet, I just can't tell you.
All right.
Okay. Another question. So the answer is 43. Another question is fractions. This is just subtracting two fractions. You got to get a common denominator. You do the common denominator, you get 1740 seconds. So that's your student needs to be familiar with fractions and handling fractions in this way. And finally, scientific notation. Scientific notation doesn't show up a whole lot, I don't think, on the tests, but it could be there, and it also might be on, say, the science test. So you should be familiar with scientific notation. And it's just a matter of moving the decimal point over to the appropriate place, and just keep in your head that if you got 10 to the negative exponent, you're dealing with small numbers. 10 to the positive exponent, you're dealing with big numbers. So again, if you don't worry too much if there's any of these questions that you're not familiar with, because you can sort that out later. I want to give you an idea of what's on the test. So that is the first 5. Then when you get your calculator, I'm going to hand things over to Warren, and he can do some that have the calculator useful. There.
Okay, the hard way is to do the quadratic formula. It's nice when you're doing multiplication of polynomials to learn how to factor as well. I don't know how much that is, but it makes this problem a lot easier if you can factor. And when all hope is lost, you can try one of those numbers into the equation and see if it adds up to 0. So I'm going to take the easiest one, D3, put 3 in there and see what I get. 3 times 3 squared is 9, times 2 is 18, plus 3 is 21, minus 21 is 0. So there are only 2 answers, and the choice of answers means the answer is going to be D. But alternately, can you press the notes? There's the formula you have to use, and there's all the work you have to do. And in 3 minutes, it's very hard to evaluate that complex quadratic equation for a GED student, I would think. Just getting 169 is tough. So but if they factor, it's x minus 3 and x plus, or 2x plus 7. So that's where the negative 3.5 comes in. And sometimes on a test like this, they'll only give you one of the 2 answers. In my high school algebra class, if it was a multiple choice test, I might just give you one of those more complicated answers to narrow your choices.
Let me just add in a couple things. First of all, the correct formula is on the sheet, so you always that's a good one to have. And second of all, occasionally it won't be a multiple choice question, but a fill in the blank question, in which case checking the solutions won't be an option. Okay.
Okay, we have a hockey puck. And what is the surface area? So you need the formula sheet to figure out what the formula is. And then you have 2, a top and a bottom. So that's pi r squared. So there's 2 pi r squared, and then the cylinder that goes around is 2 pi r h. So you really need the formula, unless you've been teaching math for 37 years. Then it's a little easier. But again, if you just put 3 in here, it makes the math a lot easier, and you can come up with 23.6 much more. The other answers are far enough away that you wouldn't have any other choice but to get 23.6.
Do they sometimes do that? I mean, you've got 23.5, but the answer is 23.6.
Yeah, well, in this one, initially I just used 3 and 2, because at one point we cut 3 down a little bit, and so I bumped the 5 up to 2 and got an answer that was, I don't know what it was, but it was not 16.5, and it wasn't 18.5, and certainly wasn't 66. So
I may have plugged just the pi button on my calculator because I do it quick, and that might have thrown it up a tiny bit. But clearly, you go with the answer that's closest. Usually, it'll just be a slight difference, if there's any difference at all.
but they really need to be good with their calculators. And
Yeah.
so that
I
teaching
think-
the calculator is an important part of the tutoring.
I think in the interest of time, let's just keep going because you're asking a lot of questions. So it's very interactive. I think we'll stop the breakout rooms and just keep going. I think that'd be best. Keep going, Warren.
Okay. Now this is a little bit tougher. We have 4 exams between 0 and 100. She must have an average score of 70 on each exam, and her scores on the first 3 exams are 64, 58, 76. What's the lowest score she can get and still pass? So she's going to be taking 4 exams, so 64 plus 58 plus 76 plus whatever is going to equal 70. And you set up that equation, and if you work it out, you get 82. So you, from basis of the scores, you're going to need a score higher than 70, because 64 and 58, that's 2, and that's 12 and 18 less than 6. So you're going to need a lot more points, and that's 82.
Does the student have to know that mean and average are the same thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah,
I mean, it's a little bit more complicated, right? Because
And
if the formula sheet says mean, and here they say average, right?
I think that they just have to learn that average in this context almost always means mean.
Yeah.
So, but it's a good point.
They do need to know most likely the median and mode though as well.
Yeah.
Well, then they have to know the difference between average, median, mean, and
Right.
etc.
Yeah. Okay. Next.
So cars listed for 36,000. Salesman says you discount of 15%. How much will the car cost? Well, that's just you have to subtract something from the original price, and what do you subtract? What the discount is, and that's 15% of. Always note that of means multiplication. So you get 0.15 times 36,000, 5,400, and then subtract it. And again, looking at the answer, you can rule out 41,000 pretty quickly, and the other ones also, but depending on their level of experience in buying and selling things. 41,000's more, and it's a discount, so that would be good. Next one.
Okay.
Okay. Now here, it's useful to draw out a picture of the baseball diamond and see what you're actually finding out, and then use the Pythagorean theorem to find the correct answer. Use the calculator. Again, rule out 90 feet and 180 feet really quickly, and if you have to, just guess at the last 2.
Okay. All right. And finally, skip the breakout room. It's the last one, Warren.
Okay. If they've had enough experience with multiplying polynomials, they know that the last term, 3 times 4, has to be -12. So you got B or D to choose, and then 5 times 6 has to be 30. So you can forget the middle terms with the choice of answers that are there, but it's better to learn FOIL. However, in 1971, I was teaching at Western Michigan, teaching assistant, and had an algebra class, and I had never heard of FOIL before. And so this guy from Troy, that I didn't even know what Troy was at that time, taught me FOIL. The first time's the first, the last time's the last, and then add the middles in the first and last.
Yeah. Where the
Have you
students
heard of
often,
FOIL?
I hadn't heard of FOIL until I started tutoring for Oklahoma City Council. I knew how to solve the problem. I just hadn't heard that acronym.
Right.
The,
So-
the place where students will make the mistakes is distributing the minus signs on these things. That's where they really have the problems. They'll get
The middle
minus
term.
20, but they'll have plus 12. Yeah.
The middle term is the hard one. So
Yeah.
the FOIL system, I don't know. You can't see my cursor, but
Mm.
the 6 times the 3, that's the outer. The inner is 4 times 5, and the first times the first is 6 times 5. So first times the first, the outer, first times the last, inner, and then the last times the last. FOIL. Next slide.
Yeah.
Or the
Okay.
question.
All right, so I'll take some now. There's a geometry questions, and usually the geometry questions aren't simply calculate the volume of a sphere or something simple. Oftentimes they have some a little more complicated. For instance, this garden is 30 feet by 20 feet, but it has this brick path. So you have to go through, you have a big garden, 30 by 20. You have to subtract off the little path 5 by 20 in order to get the area of the shaded region, which is what they want. So just realize a lot of times you'll get combinations of different shapes which you have to add together in the appropriate way. It's not terribly hard, but you don't want to just do plug and chug problems with the equations in the equation sheet. They'll oftentimes require a little bit higher level thought. Okay, I just note that you want to try to find some activity that your student really likes and that you like. For instance, I like baseball, so you see some baseball questions in here. But if your student likes cooking, there's all kinds of fraction problems you can do with cooking. If they like travel, you can do. You just try to find questions that follow what the student's interested in. Here, baseball earned run average. Well, it's an average number of runs given up in a 9-inning game. So then I give some data, basically how many innings he's pitched and how many runs that are given up. And then you can set it up sort of as a proportion. They've given up a total of 6 runs in a total of 13 2/3 innings, which is 13.67. And then that is to how many runs in 9 innings. Set it up as a proportion, you get an earned run average of 3.95, which is sort of mediocre earned run average. But that's the way you can calculate it. It's math isn't real hard. The problem is understanding the words, understanding how to translate the words into the math. Okay, now
That would
when
be
we
that's
talk, yeah,
that's a fairly
ahead.
complicated. That's a fairly complicated problem.
It's fairly complicated, and in part because I put the data in a couple long sentences rather than a nice table. If the data came in a table, I think you'd all of a sudden find that it's a little bit easier. It's more long-winded than I think complicated. You might get scared off by earned run average, but that's just it gives you the definition of it. So yeah, some of the questions are a little harder than the others. That's the way it is on the exam. Okay, list system of 2 linear equations. I think the 2 hardest questions on the exam are the quadratic equation, have to use that quadratic formula, and solving a system of linear equations like this. So the way I tell my student to do it is I take one equation and solve it for one of the variables, then I stick it in the other equation. Doesn't really matter who you pick. I personally think it'd take the second equation and solve it for y is pretty easy. So you just get y is equal to 2 plus x. And then you go back to the first equation and you plug in where you had y, you plug in 2 plus x. So now you have just a linear, first order linear equation to solve for x. And it takes a little bit of work. You go through and you finally get x equals to 1. And then once you have x equals to 1, you go back to that equation, you find y is equal to 2, and you plug the x of 1, and you get y is equal to 3. You could try to plot these on the axes and find a point where they cross. It gives a lot of insight, but on a test that's timed like this, I probably wouldn't do it. But what I would do is I'd say, okay, it's a lot of work to find x equals 1, y equals 3. let's go ahead and check it. So I'll say, okay, x is 1, y is 3. 4 times 1 plus 2 times 3. That's 4 plus 6 is 10. Minus 1 plus 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. It works. It's worth checking these answers because you can check it about 1/10 of the time you actually solve it. So it's always a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was
Yep.
taught how to, way back when, those types of equations, you can multiply one of the equations by a number, and then you can do, like in this case, you could multiply minus x plus y equals 2 by 4, and then you can add them together, and you'll get an equation just in y.
You can do that. And if you're solving 6 equations and 6 unknowns, that's absolutely the method you want to do. Or if you're writing a computer program to solve them. But if you got 2 equations and 2 unknowns, I find it easier just to teach this method rather than alternate methods, just because it's really intuitive for those simple cases. I don't think they'd ever give you 6 equations and 6 unknowns or anything on the test. So yeah, if the student already knows how to do it that way, then by all means, don't try to retrain them. But if the student doesn't know how to begin, I personally find this way. And in general, if your student already has knowledge and already knows how to solve some problem some way, I generally don't recommend trying to retrain them in an alternate method. But if they don't know, that you can use the method you think is easiest. Okay. Here's a problem with, it's got 3 things that are kind of unusual. First of all, it's an inequality instead of an equality. It's got the absolute value signs, and it's got the solution on the number line. Now, I'll tell you the truth. I usually find the number line so kind of simple that it's almost trivial. But for inequalities, the number line actually comes in handy. What I usually tell my students is a problem like this, replace the inequality by equal sign and find the endpoints. So 4x minus 4 is equal to 5. That gives you x equals 9. That's one endpoint. It's absolute value. So you could do 4 minus x is equal to 5, and you get x equal minus 1, the other endpoint. And then I just try some points between them or outside the range and see which ones work. No use spending a lot of time trying to come up with a real fancy method to solve these. In general, these questions tend to be simple enough that the simplest method is the best method. And it turns out that the answer is B in this range. For instance, 0, you could try 0. Absolute value minus 4 is 4. 4 is indeed less than 5. So 0 has got to be included in the range. So they will sometimes run into inequalities as well as equalities. And here, this problem. Yep.
We go back, Brad, just a second.
Yes.
We go back to the last slide. If in this form, you can do the center x minus 4, solve that equation. Say center of this interval is going to be 4, and then you go 5 on either side of 4 to get your answer. So it's
I hadn't thought about that. That's
kind of
clever.
x minus a equals d, and then the answer is 4 plus d and 4 minus, 4 plus 5 and 4 minus 5.
Very good. This is really a problem where you just have to see if the student knows how to use their calculator to calculate a square root. It's surprising because, like I said, my calculator, the actual process of putting in the numbers and punching the keys is different on my calculator than the one that the GED uses. So at first I couldn't tell my student how to calculate square root of 150. However, again, you can do this by estimation. It's really useful if the student knows their perfect squares. 2 squared is 4, 4 squared is 16, 12 squared is 144, that's a little less than 150, 13 squared, 169, a little bit more than 150. It's got to be between 12 and 13. That rules out A and C. 144 is a little closer to 150 than 169 is, so it turns out to be D. And if you just use your calculator, you get 12.2. And the other thing you can do if you just can't make the square root key work is you can square each of these numbers and find out which one's 150. So there's a lot of little tricks like that to keep in mind. And let's see here. This is a baseball question. Sphere, circumference of a baseball. A sphere is 9 inches. Circumference, actually a circumference belongs to a circle, but it's the equator of the sphere is what we're talking about. How much leather is needed to cover the baseball? So that's basically a surface area question. On my answer sheet, but again, this is not a question that's just a plug and chug. First, you got to find the radius from the circumference. And then once you have the radius from the circumference, you use the surface area equation, SA, surface area is 4 pi r squared, to get the surface area, which is the amount of leather. So a lot of the geometry questions will be kind of two-step problems like this one. Gives you 26 square inches. Okay, and another one here is this problem. Drive 5 miles east and 12 miles south. How far are you from the starting point? It's a little vaguely worded. It'd be better if I said, how far are you from the starting point as the crow flies? I mean, the distance from the starting point. This is a Pythagorean's theorem, which is given on the formula sheet. And this one turns out to be you're just trying to find the diagonal side, technically the hypotenuse, when the sides are 5 and 12. Use Pythagorean's theorem. It's nice and it gets you an integer. It won't always will, but this is what's called a Pythagorean triple. Gives you 13 for the solution. Here's a combination problem. This is a combinations is when you're counting and order doesn't matter. So Adam, Bob, Carl, Dan, Ed, and Frank are contestants in a cooking competition. Only 2 of the contestants are going to move forward to the next level. How many ways can the contestants move forward? You know, how many possible ways are there? And I've found, and there are kind of little formulas involving factorials that you can teach your student. I personally don't think, I never can remember them. They're not on the formula sheet, and I don't find them all that useful because these questions tend to be easy. I say write out all the possibilities in some systematic way so you can be sure you don't miss one. No, but they're not going to give you 86 different contestants on the GED. Here's going to be some small number like this. Easiest thing is just write them out in a systematic way. Notice order doesn't matter. BA is the same as AB. Adam and Bob is the same as Bob and Adam. You're sending 2 forward. So you just then count them up. 5 plus 4 is 9, plus 3 is 12, 13, 14, 15, and you got the answer. Remember, in combinations, the order doesn't matter. Okay, oops, I was supposed to hand this off to Warren, but I will let him take the next one. Okay.
Okay, you have $25,000 to live on, and your bank is paying 4% annual rate. How much money do you need to save in order to live off the interest? So, is it going to be $1 million, $100,000, $625,000, or $250,000? Well, you have to know the formula. Principal equals the interest rate times the time, and it has to be 25,000. So we have to divide by 4 and come up with the decimal point in the right place, and we get the answer B.
Yeah. Whenever you see these formulas written with the gray background, that's off the formula sheet right there. Okay, good. Warren?
So here's the median value. So we needed the average before the mean. Now we need the median. So we have to know that's the middle of those. And they're not put in order as they are written. So you have to write them out. And, you can leave off the zeros and just do 133, 154, 175, 189. And then count off what's the middle number there. It looks like 205,000.
Yeah.
Now, this one, I would hope that when you teach or tutor lines and you have this, that you know slope and intercept. And here the slope is -1/2, so we're going downhill. And that's going to be A or C. And then it has to cross at +3. So that looks like it's going to be C. Other way is to plot 2 points, put in 2 for X, and find out that Y is 1 and see which one of those graphs goes through the point 2, 1 and goes downhill. And that's C,
Sorry.
even though there's no scale on the lines. Next one, unless there's questions. Okay, a little bit of geometry here. Is X going to be bigger than 30 or smaller than 30? And alternate interior, what is this? Well, it's 150. So it's bigger. How much bigger? It's got to add up to 180. So you have to teach some geometry there about parallel lines. So next one. I love these problems. I do them every day when I'm driving. So you drive 760 miles, it's 10 hours and 40 minutes. And I'd probably round off. So I know if I did it in 10 hours, it'd be 76. So, but it took longer than that. So it's going to be less. So I'm down to 73 or 71 and do the math to get to 71.3 or guess. Next one. Okay, perimeter. We have 2 straight lines, radius 3. So we'd have to know the circumference, 2 pi r, and 1/4 of the circumference. And add them up. And you have the perimeter.
Yeah.
Okay, roll 2 dice. What is the probability showing? Why I can't see here. Your pictures are in the way. So there's 36 total possibilities. And how many ways can you get 8? And there's 5 of them, so it's 13.9%.
Yeah. So, all right. So I'm going to start skipping some of these because we don't have a whole lot of time, but this is another one with interest. We've seen one of those before. With these probability questions, you can do probability flipping coins. That's almost trivial. Cards can get really complicated quick, although this one's fairly easy. The dice gives you some nice semi difficult ones. This is just draw 1 card out of a deck of 52. So you got 1 over 52 chance, which turns out to be 1.92%. These are
Brad?
really important. Yes.
In the interest of time, I wonder if I shared at the beginning the link to your slides, but maybe we should open it up to questions or that folks have. We need to wrap up here in the next minute.
Okay. Are there questions about anything?
Are these problems you made up, or they're actually from the GED?
They are problems I made up based on what I saw on various GED tests from books, websites, practice GED tests that the GED publishes, that kind of thing. I made up similar problems.
Oh, okay.
So
this is kind of the average hardness or difficulty of these questions.
I think so. Assuming that I got it right, this I think is this average difficulty. There might be slightly harder than the test, is my guess. If it's not accurate to the test, it might be slightly harder, but I think it's pretty close.
But certainly get books from the library and go through some of those GED tests and those materials that Laurie can provide.
So, sorry, just
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Question?
I do have a question.
Sorry, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you gentlemen have a wealth of knowledge because you've been teaching, adults or young adults these concepts. So I'm wondering, even though you have slides, I'm thinking like an instructional designer and wondering if there's anything that's already shareable that's in a document that would be broken down into identified problem types, and maybe 2 or 3 examples of each along with solutions and any tips that you had, because you shared some great tips along the way. And especially with the interest of time, instead of, you know, the test taker going through the whole process of solving it, trying to actually plug in some of the answer options to see, you know, do we have a winner here? So I personally would find that really helpful.
Your essential education that the Oakland Literacy Council has is sort of what you just described. It's got a bunch of different topics and it got a bunch of different sample exams, but also topics and suggested curricula. I think that's one of your best things. The other thing is, like we said, you can get these great big books from the library. I wouldn't pay the money for them, but and those are the best options that I can think of.
Thank you.
Other questions?
So GED is equivalent to what? 8th grade math? 7th grade? 8th grade?
You know, they would say it's supposed to represent passing high school, but I view it as sort of sophomore math, in my opinion. Algebra 1 and geometry, not above that, is how I view it. Maybe, Warren, do you have some sense of what sort of level?
I would say that's probably true from the list of topics that you presented here. That would be Algebra 1 and geometry.
Other countries, maybe that's 5th grade, but here,
but that's 7th grade now for the accelerated students.
Okay.
So Algebra 2 wouldn't be in this GED.
I don't think so. I haven't looked at the curriculum for Algebra 2 in 40 years, but my impression is sort of Algebra 1. I think you do quadratic equation and a system of linear equations in Algebra 1, and you don't do any of those other complicated things we talked about. So
probably the probability and statistics could be beyond geometry and Algebra 1. But
let me just say one thing about statistics, because there's really only 4 things you need to know about statistics: median, mean, mode, and the range, highest minus the lowest. There's no standard deviation. There's no normal distribution. There's no t-tests. When they call it statistics, they're really talking about mean, median, mode, range. And that's it. And looking at a table of numbers and just doing basic interpretation. So to call it statistics is sort of giving a grand name to what they really have a very low-level thing in this test. Questions?
Right. I want to thank all of you for being here. I'm going to stop the
just one question.
Yes.
Laurie. I'm looking at the this ABE tests. Is this different from the GED? I'm looking at